So let's keep talking about the kings of Israel. After Saul came David, the shepherd king after God's own heart. Samuel is sent to anoint David, and this time, although David is ruddy and handsome, he is apparently not a standout type king like Saul was, because God has to reassure Samuel, do not consider his appearance or his height. The Lord does not look at the thing man looks at. Man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. 1 Samuel 16:7. Thus starts a tension-filled time, as David has been anointed king secretly by Samuel, but Saul is still in power for many years. David rises to prominence as the slayer of Goliath, and then as a warrior and commander of Saul's army, so much so that Saul gets jealous, realizes that David will get the throne instead of his son Jonathan, so he embarks on a long campaign to try and kill David. For years, David is an outlaw on the run, his small band of followers, around 600 men, plus women and children, avoiding the pursuit of Saul's large army. The Philistines ultimately kill Saul and Jonathan, so David becomes king. He conquers Jerusalem and makes it his capital, bringing the Ark of the Covenant there. He wants to build a permanent temple for God, but God says no. One who will come after him will build it. A dual prophecy about his immediate son Solomon, but also about his descendant Jesus. Though David is a man after God's own heart, he lets his desire lead him into sin with Bathsheba. There will be a long-term pain caused by this and consequences, but at the same time, God redeems the sin by making his second son Solomon king of Israel. The final judgment on David's leadership and character. Psalm 78, verses 70 through 72 say, God chose David his descendant and took him up from the sheep pens. From tending the sheep he brought him to be the shepherd of his people Jacob, the inheritance of Israel his inheritance. And David shepherded him with integrity and heart. With skillful hands he led him. So after David, his son Solomon became king, the world's wisest man who was not wise enough. Solomon becomes king, and one night before a big worship service, God appears to him, offering to grant him a wish. Solomon is filled with humility, and so asks for wisdom to govern the great nation Israel has become. The Lord loves this request, grants it, and gives him riches and everything else besides it. For a while, things go fantastically while Solomon is king. Solomon builds a fantastic temple of gold and precious gem, the likes of which is unimaginable. The Ark of the Covenant is brought into the central room of the temple, the Holy of Holies, amidst an unimaginably lavish ceremony. He expands the territory of Israel and makes allies of many surrounding kingdoms. He amasses incredible wealth, power, and worldwide fame, so much so that even other kings and queens, such as the Queen of Sheba, make pilgrimages to see his wealth and wisdom firsthand. On the map that is in the email you guys got, you'll be able to see physically how he expanded the kingdom. And lastly, he marries a ton of women. And that is actually not a good thing. It's not a wise choice. Here's what happens in 1 King 11. This is what God feels about it. King Solomon, however, loved many foreign women besides Pharaoh's daughter, Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Sidonites, and Hittites. They were from nations about which the Lord had told Israelites, you must not intermarry with them, because they will surely turn your hearts after their gods. Nevertheless, Solomon held fast to them in love. He had 700 wives of royal birth and 300 concubines, and his wives led him astray. As Solomon grew old, his wives turned his heart after other gods, and his heart was not fully devoted to the Lord his God, as the heart of David his father had been. He followed Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonites, and Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. So Solomon did evil in the eyes of the Lord. He did not follow the Lord completely, as David his father had done. On a hill east of Jerusalem, Solomon built a high place for Chemosh, the detestable god of Moab, and for Molech, the detestable god of the Ammonites. He did the same for all his foreign wives, who burned incense and offered sacrifices to their gods. The Lord became angry with Solomon because his heart had turned away from the Lord, the God of Israel, who had appeared to him twice. Although he had forbidden Solomon to follow other gods, Solomon did not keep the Lord's commands. So the Lord said to Solomon, since this is your attitude, and you have not kept my covenant and my decrees, which I commanded you, I will most certainly tear the kingdom away from you and give it to your subordinates. Nevertheless, for the sake of David your father, I will not do it during your lifetime. I will tear it out from the hand of your son. Yet I will not tear the whole kingdom from him, but give him one tribe for the sake of David my servant, and for the sake of Jerusalem, which I have chosen." Solomon marries Gentile wives, even though God told the Jews not to intermarry with Gentiles because of the peer pressure weakness they're so prone to. The wives pressure him into building places of worship for their gods, and even get Solomon to join them in the ceremonies. God tells Solomon that, as a result, though during the rest of his life the kingdom will be fine, it will crumble after he is gone. Solomon wasn't like David, not fully devoted to the Lord. At heart, he was more like Saul, tempted to obey the Lord only partially. Do you ever feel that temptation? To settle for good enough with the things the Lord asked you to do, but not go all the way, or to finish the race? Are you honest enough to recognize that your partial obedience isn't obedience at all? It's all or nothing. You can either obey God or disobey Him. When you and I become followers of Christ, we signed over the whole of our hearts and our lives to God, not just a part of it. There's a personal illustration that I've heard given on this. Say a family is trying to sell their house. Can you imagine if when they're selling it, they try to sell everything except for the master bedroom and the closet in it on the second floor? Sell everything else, but they still want to keep that one little part of the house. That's not how selling things work. It's just ridiculous to think about. But we're tempted to do this with our hearts, not just with this example. We sold the whole thing to Jesus when we entered into the covenant with Him and accepted salvation and His lordship. But then we try and turn around and keep off that one bedroom we really like for ourselves. It's only the bedroom, Lord. It's only the closet in the bedroom. It's not like it's the whole thing. What's the harm? I'm following you in all the other areas of my life. I just can't keep this area for myself. The harm is that in that closet or bedroom, the things that you're cherishing, it is gangrene. It's going to spread and infect all the other areas of your life. Just like Solomon, the longer you let it live, the more it will spread throughout your life and the choices you make. Choices like who you will marry, what sort of compromises you'll be willing to make on your job, what sorts of violent or sexual media you'll be willing to view. We must strive to be wholly devoted to God, not partially. Take a few minutes to reflect on what closet you might be reserving for yourself and not devoting to God.